lush, wide, warm, cold, ambient, atmospheric, dreamy, ethereal. These are some of the descriptions given to the sounds in many different songs, of many different styles and genres. Synth Pads. And here's 5 ways to make them. First way, simple. As per usual with this series, we're going to start with the simplest method. I do want to put a disclaimer here. Even though I'm using certain instruments and plugins for this, you don't have to use exactly the ones that I'm using. I am just trying to show you in a pretty general way how to make these sounds instead of trying to do very specific types of sounds. I have here a very basic virtual analog synth OBX by G-Force. So far, the initialized patch. It's just one sawtooth. So let's add a second oscillator and hear that. Detune it. Now for a synth pad, we want a slow attack and long release. Over here in the envelopes, let's give that to both the loudness, it's called loudness, but to both the volume and the filter, long attack and a long release. And those are the basic ingredients of a pad, but we can't just leave it here. It's a little bit too basic. Let's add some more dimension to the sound. First thing I'm going to do is, instead of select the sawtooth for the second oscillator, I'm going to change it to a pulse. Let's hear just that. So now it's a pulse wave or a square wave. Let's add some pulse width, and what that does is it changes the duty cycle or the shape of the square in the waveform. And what I kind of want to do with this is set it so that the pulse width will actually change. So it kind of does that. And the way that we do that is to add some modulation to here. So over here is the LFO. I'm going to select PWM2 because that's for the second oscillator, and that's what this is. And I'm going to add some modulation depth. It's really fast. Let's bring the speed down. So now you hear the pulse width actually changing. Don't want it to change too terribly much. Something a little more subtle like this. Let's bring the first oscillator back into the mix. Hear that on its own. And I think with this same LFO, I'm going to modulate the pitch of the first oscillator just a little bit. Don't want it to go too much because then it sounds like this. Somewhere around here is nice. Nice. Now let's actually change the filter settings so that we can hear the effect of the envelope on the filter. Let's bring the cutoff down, the resonance up. Let's bring up the modulation amount. And let's also key track it just a little bit so that the lower notes are going to be darker than the higher notes. It has a very quick decay, so let's change that as well. Sustain, we can bring that down for both of them a little bit. There's a little bit of a swell in for the filter. But what's cool about this is that because I have separate envelopes, I can set it so that the volume and the filter envelopes can be different. Let's say I wanted it brighter before it gets louder. I could have the attack of the filter be a little bit quicker than the attack of the volume. You can hear the filter kind of close down a little bit as it gets louder. I could even have the opposite. I could have it get louder first and then get brighter later on. One thing that's cool with this plugin, at least, is I can pan each of the voices to a different position. That way I can give this a lot more stereo spacing to this sound. Here are the final settings for this sound. This is ready to run through some reverb. Second way, evolving. Now to have a pad evolve, you'll need a bit more modulation and control over different parts of the sound. For this first part, I'll show using FM synthesis. With FM, you'll likely have more than just two oscillators to work with, or a modulator-carrier pair. And because of the way FM is done, we have envelopes for every oscillator. So if we're working with 4 oscillators, that's 4 envelopes. I have here a basic setup in Phase Plant to do some FM stuff. So let's go and change our attacks for the envelopes. This oscillator that I'm editing right now is going straight to the output. The other one is down here. Let's mute it so we're only hearing one. So that's our attack for the first sound. And the second one, we'll have a similar one, but we will change them a little bit later. So now they both have a very similar envelope shape. So now what I'm going to do is slightly detune them so we can hear a little bit of this, it's beating. Which is much more pronounced the higher up on the keys I play. And change the oscillator shape. But for right now, just to make sure we don't have too harsh of a sound, I'm going to stick to sine waves. And I'm going to work on the first FM pair. So for this one, just drag out the envelopes and do this. Because what's going to happen is this is going to be modulating the carrier down here with its shape. So let's link that here. We're not hearing the sound of this directly. We're hearing this oscillator's effect on this oscillator. And so it's changing the shape of the waveform here. But if we were to change this envelope, we could hear how this affects this sound. You can hear how its effect is ramping up, almost like it's a filter, but it's not a filter. Of course, we can increase the effect so it's more pronounced. And we can change the tuning. So that's our first pair already set up. Let's go to the next pair down here. This one, I'm thinking of making it a bit different. I've changed the sine waves to triangle waves, and the reason it sounds this strange right now is because of the tuning offset. So even though I do have an LFO down here, and it is set to modulate the pitch if I use the mod wheel, what's happening here is that these two tunings are not the same. They're not a perfect ratio. I have this set to just slightly detuned from the second harmonic. See how it's kind of more in tune if I were to increase this? But I bring it down, and there's that weird detuning effect. The other thing that's making it sound weird, it's kind of sounding almost like a fake key sync kind of sound, or not a key sync, a hard sync kind of sound, and that's because this carrier is actually tuned to the higher harmonic while the modulator is tuned to the lower harmonic. So if I were to turn this off, the carrier is an octave above the modulator. I can soften the sound by turning the carrier to a sine wave. And so all of these together sound like that. I'm going to change So what I did in this sound is I actually added some LFOs. They're both very, very slowly oscillating LFOs, and one of them is modulating the rate of FM by going to the sustain. The other LFO is modulating the level of the other modulator. Some of the other things that are going on is I added some feedback into both of these modulators so that they're a little bit brighter. And what's happening, at least in this lower modulator carrier pair, is that it's changing the triangle shape just somewhat. So it's getting this kind of brighter and then slightly darker sound. The other thing that I did was I added this envelope here, and it's tracking the pitch only of this modulator, which is giving it that kind of ring modulator sound. And the idea here is that these modulators, as well as that envelope at the start there, is changing the timbre and overall quality of the sound over time. And a similar thing is going on with the first modulator. And I do also have the carrier feeding back into the modulator as well. All of that going on at the same time with those changes slowly happening to the sound. We haven't even added any mod wheel yet. Which is also interesting because I've only routed that modulation to the carrier waves and not the modulator, so it's going to sound a little bit more distorted as well. And of course, with reverb, chorus, and delay, and a little bit of EQing, it sounds like this. We can hear the changes happening in the timbre and the modulation, pitch, and FM amounts. They're not too overpowering, they're not front and center, and they're not distracting. They're not too subtle either. They're definitely noticeable, but they are changes that can help add some kind of breadth to the sound. Of course, the effects also help as well. Beyond FM, there's also wavetable synthesis. Wavetables are essentially multiple waveforms arranged together as frames that you can scan through. Some are complex, some are simple. Here in Phaseplant, I have this wavetable set up so that there are a few modulators. I have an envelope and this random generator that is changing the position of the actual wavetable that we're hearing when we're playing the sound. So this so far sounds like this with a little bit of delay and reverb on it. And both of these modulators are changing which wave we're actually hearing here. And this would be our evolution. Now, of course, depending on the wavetable, as I said, it could be very complex, like something like this, or it could be as simple as, say, transitioning from a sawtooth to a sine wave. Method 3, sampling. Samples of different sounds can be used to make pads, either by looping or sequencing, or letting long samples play out till the end. Depending on the sample, the final pad could end up being tonal, atonal, or non-tonal at all. It may not even sound musical. It may sound very noisy, very textured. If you're using a sampler or sample-based instrument that allows you to use more than one sample, you can have different types of samples playing together to make the same pad sound. Like I have here with Phaseplant, I have only one sample oscillator loaded in here, but I can add another. And so just in case I wanted to use two samples, I can use that. I'm going to drag a sample in here. The first sample I have is this. It's not pitched to C, it's actually pitched to B flat or A sharp. So let's put that in tune with the notes that I'm actually playing. It sounds like that. Of course, since it's playing to the end and then stopping, we're going to add a loop. Now, depending on the complexity of the sample that you're using, if I were to leave it like this and maybe add some reverb later, I have kind of a satisfying sound. But again, it depends on what you already have in the sample. If I wanted to do more with this sound and add, say, another dimension or another element to it with this second sample, I can put in something else, like maybe this sample. It's an ambient saxophone type thing. Of course, let's give this some envelope shape appropriate to that of a pad. And let's loop that as well. The sample is actually initially tuned to G, and that's why it sounds like it's a fifth above, is because it's at a G. So I'm going to leave that root note as it is. I could also detune it here with the semitone, but I think it's fine. It doesn't ultimately matter with this sample. So both of these together give us this interesting thing. But of course, I can always put this at the right note. And because of the nature of these samples, I don't really need to do much more, except add some effects here. But of course, I can do more anyway. I have down here an envelope. I'm gonna get rid... No, I'm not. I'm actually going to use this to do something I think could be interesting. Because both of these are tuned to the same thing, I'm going to use this and apply this to the pitch of one of them. It's now pitching up to the note just slightly at the start. What if I were to do something completely different from what I just did and put in a different sound entirely, different type of sound? You can add a texture or something that is not necessarily tonal, like this one right here. Sounds like very metallic clanking, doesn't it? Almost like some machinery kind of like turning a gear. But if you can tell by the sample name, this is actually originally a sample of crickets. I ran it through several different pitch delays, and they were all pitching down. So you can hear the chirp kind of up here a little bit. I think it actually might be higher. But the lower pitched sound is that same sound just pitched lower through delays. Now, if I were to add, say, a delay, really fast delay with a bit of feedback, and then some reverb, I have a sound effects like pad. And all just from a texture. Method 4, layering. This part involves putting multiple sounds together. The sounds may be components or parts of a sound, or they could be fully finished sounds that you are arranging so that they can be played together. For me, the sweet spot for a layered pad is 3 basic elements, and that is the fundamental. Usually the fundamental means the base note of a tone, but in this case, I mean more of the foundation of the overall pad, the main tonal element, whatever that is. The second character is the body, and that can be anything that fills out the overtones or space not occupied by the fundamental sound. And the third is movement, and that movement can be in the sounds that are already occupied by the fundamental and the body, or it can be a new sound entirely, and it could be texture, it could be noise, it could be rhythm, it could be a sequence, it could be something high-pitched or lower-pitched, but the requirement is that it has to add movement to the sound, if not already present. This approach for me makes it so that a pad can pretty much be almost like an organ or an orchestra with many different parts playing. By having sounds that meet these needs, I can cover a lot of notes and a lot of tones and sometimes rhythms. These 3 elements don't require a maximum or minimum number of sounds. But that being said, I do have 3 sounds set up here in Unify. The first sound is the one that we just made in Phase Plant, and it's the first sampling pad. It's going to be this one. This is going to be our basic body of the sound, because there are harmonic overtones. There's also a bit of space, because I think in both samples there's a little bit of reverb baked into the sounds. You can almost kind of hear that, even though there's no reverb or delay in this sound. The second one is the first sound that we made in OBX, and that sound is this. And this is going to be our fundamental. And the last sound is going to be our revised other sampling sound that I just made with the clanking crickets. And this is going to be part of the movement, but also a little bit of an added texture for this sound. Altogether, they sound like this. Another thing that layering can help you do is in realizing what needs to be fixed or what needs to be changed. I'm going to extend the attack and release for that second sound a little bit more. Maybe even add a little bit of reverb. Now, what I've just showed was having 3 layers of sounds in Unify, but you don't need Unify to do that. In fact, if you were to have it set up like I have here in a DAW, you could do some other things with that. So right now I have the same exact note regions for each of these sounds as exactly the same. And to just give a little bit of a preview, it's a very big wash of sound, but what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to set each of these regions to have different notes playing, and we're going to hear what that sounds like. What I have here are the same regions, but they all have different notes, and what this allows us to do is we can have a fully layered, fully textured sound where each of the sounds can be triggered by a different note at a different time. It doesn't all have to be played all at once by the same key at the same point. And so this now sounds like this. Each of the regions has different notes. Now, because of how these sounds could be used, not necessarily these specific sounds, but layered sounds together could be used in this way to create a pad in a mix with so many other instruments. Even though it might also sound like there are 3 separate pad sounds kind of playing against each other, it all comes down to how these notes interact with each other and how the sounds can coalesce together to form a pad. 5th method, Verblay. This completely made up word is a combination of reverb and delay. The reason why I'm combining both of those is because, well, reverb is kind of a form of a delay, but using both of these together actually can make your pad sounds really pad-like. One of the ways to make sounds is by using a reverb with a very long decay. One of my favorites is this effect here called butterfly effect, but I already made a video on that, so instead I'm going to use Supermassive. Valhalla Supermassive is a free reverb, but it also has delay. It does a bit of both. So already with the sound that I have here, it does this. With the default settings, there's quite a bit of delay, a little bit of feedback, but there's also some modulation. And we hear that kind of chorusing effect in the delay. That's the modulation. So what I'd like to do to make this a really long reverb is to add some feedback and some density to the sound. And then warp the delay a little bit so that it does that. Mostly it's just a long reverb, doesn't really transform the sound. And that's mostly because the sound that I'm using has an attack and a quick decay rather than a slow attack and long sustain. But if I were to increase the delay here, add some density and add even more feedback, I get something that lasts a lot longer. I can control how bright the sound is by bringing down the EQ of the highs. Maybe bring up the EQ of the lows if it gets too low. There are also different modes in Supermassive that will change the quality of your delay or reverb. Hydra adds a little bit more of a discrete delay to the sound, even if we have it with a lot of warp and feedback and density. Centaurus is a bit shorter compared to what we started with Gemini. Similar with Sagittarius. Great Annihilator has a very long delay. With Andromeda, it's interesting. The delay is actually affecting when the first delay is happening as well. It's kind of like a pre-delay, and because it's at 100%, my initial key press is not making any sound at all. Which makes this much longer delay than the other modes that I've played so far. This one is more of a straightforward delay reverb. Very long delay. Basically, we can use reverbs like this to get a very long, very big sound, even if it doesn't have a very long sustain or release in the original sound. Another cool way to use reverb is to use shimmer reverb. Shimmer reverb involves taking a sound and adding pitch shift. Usually there's a little bit of feedback here so that when there is any pitch shift, it's going to feedback. So if you set it to, let's say, a fifth above, then that would continue up because it's a delayed pitch shifter. There are plugins for this, but you can also have this effect just using stock plugins within your DAW. Right here I have the same sound that I made at the beginning, and that's this pad sound. I have this going into a bus, and in this bus, I'm going to add a pitch shifter. That's going to be at 100% mix. We can hear that. Sounds like that. just so we could get rid of that clipping. It's a strange artifact. So what I'm going to do is add another pitch shifter here. Now we can hear that it's up another fifth from here. Now, because of it's going into it serially, it's not going to keep going up in pitch. So instead of putting it there, I'm actually going to send this to another bus. And what that sounds like is this so far. And you can hear it just keeps going up because it's feeding back into itself. What we can now do from that is send all of that into a reverb. So this final sound is I wanted it to mostly go through the reverb, and so what I've done is I took the auxiliary track and muted that completely. I have the main instrument track also muted, and in the first pitch shifter I brought in a little bit of the dry mix so we can still hear the main pitch coming through. But now I have the dual pitch shifter and the reverb both over here coming through to the stereo mix. And that's one way to make shimmer reverb if you don't have an external plugin. And those are just 5 ways to make synth pads. I'm sure with some musical exploration, you can find out many more. I'll see you on the flip side. Catch you later.